When most of us think about the concept of dreaming, we visualize the sort of biological maintenance cycle. It's like your brain is running a late-night defragmentation program on a hard drive.
Right, like a routine cleanup.
Yeah, exactly. It's just synaptic pruning. Your neurons are deciding to discard the memory of what you had for lunch, but keeping the information you need for your job.
It's all very mechanical.
It really is. It feels like this chaotic jumble of daytime anxieties and bizarre mashups of people you haven't seen in a decade, just playing out on a television screen, displaying mental white noise.
And I mean, that is the standard modern framework we use to understand sleep. We view it as an entirely passive, disjointed process. The biological organism shuts down for repairs, the conscious mind goes offline, and the subconscious just handles the mess.
We simply sleep through it, right? Assuming nothing profound is actually happening.
Exactly. We assume there's no consequence beyond basic cellular restoration.
So, consider an alternative scenario. Imagine turning on that mental television, and instead of disjointed static, you find yourself standing inside a hyper-realistic live-action landscape.
Oh, wow.
Right. A fully functioning world operating with its own distinct laws of physics and, honestly, its own independent intelligence. You step into a place you can actively explore, and you quickly realize this environment is looking right back at you.
Responding to your presence.
Yes. Welcome to this deep dive. Our focus today centers on a really fascinating interview with a lucid dreamer named Ruth. The piece is titled Beyond the Hallway of Doors, an interview on lucidity.
It's incredible source material.
It really is. We're going to trace her evolution from experiencing these spontaneous childhood dreams to navigating profound, reality-bending encounters that actively challenge our understanding of consciousness and the human mind.
And, setting the stakes for this exploration requires us to dismantle a very common preconception. Because the term lucid dreaming often evokes the idea of a consequence-free virtual playground.
Oh, totally. People imagine realizing they are asleep and then immediately using that awareness to fly over cities or conjure up their favorite celebrities.
Right. But the source material we are examining today presents a dramatically different paradigm. This isn't about escapism at all. It is a rigorous opportunity to explore hidden layers of the self and the actual architecture of reality.
It's not just a game.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Our objective today is to unpack the mechanics of Ruth's experiences and understand the specific ways her journey interrogates the limitations of our normal waking ego.
To really comprehend the depths of this practice, we have to look at the psychological transition a person undergoes when they shift from an accidental tourist to a deliberate explorer.
Because she didn't start out as a master practitioner.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Ruth's entry into this world actually began in childhood with spontaneous lucid dreams. She describes realizing she was asleep and simply using the opportunity to fly around.
Which is such a classic childhood lucid dream.
Yeah, think about experiencing that as a kid. It would be akin to discovering you have a literal superpower. But because children have this baseline acceptance of magic, she assumed every other kid on the playground also went home, went to sleep, and did the exact same thing.
She just used it to play. And the psychology of a child allows for that kind of fluid acceptance. The boundaries between imagination and reality are just highly permeable for them.
So the impossible is just integrated into their daily routine.
Exactly. Without triggering an existential crisis, the critical evolution in Ruth's mindset occurred much later, when those psychological boundaries were firmly established, specifically when she was entering her 30s.
Right. The timeline places this turning point in May 2022. She had just returned from a 4-month journey abroad. And almost immediately upon returning, she was hit with a deeply charged nightly surge of both lucid dreams and out-of-body experiences, or OBEs.
And these weren't just occasional anomalies, right?
No, they were relentless, happening night after night. Her description of this period is striking. She refers to the surge as a knock on a door she was not ready to open.
That is such a powerful image.
It really is. She didn't embrace the childhood superpower this time. Instead, she panicked and actively wished for the experiences to stop. And curiously enough, her subconscious listened. The door shut.
Well, her reaction perfectly illustrates the defense mechanisms of the adult waking ego.
Yeah.
In our waking lives, the prefrontal cortex, the logical organizing center of the brain, maintains absolute authority.
It builds the narrative.
Yes, a cohesive narrative of who we are, where we are, and how the physical universe operates. When Ruth suddenly found her conscious awareness forcefully transported into an environment that defied all physical laws, That cohesive narrative was threatened.
She actually feared losing her mind, didn't she?
She explicitly feared losing the ability to distinguish her lucid experiences from her waking reality. The ego protects its own structural integrity by violently rejecting phenomena it cannot control.
Which makes sense. You spend decades building a career, an identity, a daily routine, and suddenly this intense nightly force threatens to blur the boundaries of your sanity. It is entirely logical to retreat.
Absolutely.
But a year after shutting that door, her perspective shifted. She realized she had encountered a very rare avenue for self-discovery and had let fear dictate her response. So, approaching her 33rd birthday, she quietly asked the universe, or, her deeper self, for a second chance.
Promising not to retreat this time.
Right. And when the intervals returned, the dynamic had shifted. She was no longer a terrified, passive recipient. She committed to intentionally learning the mechanics of the practice.
Moving from a state of fear to a state of readiness fundamentally alters how the brain interacts with the dream state. She began to approach it as a complex environment requiring deliberate study.
Okay, I need to pause the narrative here and genuinely push back on the premise for a second. Because any listener tuning in with a background in science or biology is going to have a healthy degree of skepticism here.
Oh.
Neuroscience generally models dreaming as an internal closed-loop system. The brainstem is firing random signals, the cortex tries to synthesize those signals using leftover memories, and we experience that synthesis as a dream. By definition, we are generating the imagery.
That is the biological consensus, yes.
So how does Ruth, or any serious practitioner, differentiate between encountering a genuine, autonomous architecture and simply experiencing an ultra-vivid, self-generated hallucination?
That is the essential question bridging neuroscience and consciousness studies. The closed-loop biological model assumes that you experiencing the dream is the sole author of the script.
Right. It's just you talking to yourself.
But Ruth's sustained practice led her to a realization that directly contradicts that model. When a dreamer achieves high-level lucidity, they retain the analytical capabilities of their waking prefrontal cortex.
So they can actually study the environment while they're in it.
Exactly. With that analytical mind active, Ruth observed that the environment possessed an autonomous architecture of intelligence, awareness, wisdom, and time.
Meaning it's not a virtual reality game she was programming.
No. She realized she was a visitor in an environment that generated complex information, symbols, and architectural structures completely foreign to her waking memory bank.
If we entertain that framework, it suggests the subconscious mind isn't just a storage locker for our daily memories. It is a massive independent processing system with its own agency.
And it forces a profound humbling of the waking ego. I mean, the voice in our heads that narrates our daily lives assumes it represents the totality of our consciousness.
We like to think we're running the whole show.
Right. But if the dreamscape operates as an independent teacher, generating environments and wisdom beyond our conscious capacity, it means our waking identity holds only a fragmentary understanding of our own existence.
Wow.
Trying to harness lucid dreams solely to serve waking desires, like treating it like a personal sandbox, is a massive limitation to true self-discovery.
So that transition from trying to control the dream to letting the dream teach you requires specialized mechanics. We are moving from high-level philosophy to the literal techniques of navigating this space.
It is not easy to do consistently.
No, getting into this space takes months of analyzing bodily states and understanding the exact transition point between wakefulness and sleep. The practitioner has to essentially trick the body into entering REM atonia.
Which is the natural paralysis that prevents us from acting out our dream.
Exactly, while keeping the conscious mind awake and alert.
Maintaining conscious awareness while the body's sensory inputs disconnect is a super delicate balancing act. If the mind becomes too active, you literally wake the physical body up.
But if you relax too much,
You lose lucidity and slip into a normal unconscious dream.
when Ruth successfully threads that needle, a specific structural pattern emerges in her transition. She becomes fully aware that her physical body is asleep in her apartment. Then, her dream body walks out her front door.
But it's not the normal hallway outside her apartment.
No, it molds into what she describes as a lucid hallway. It becomes this vast corridor lined with doors spanning multiple floors. Think about the biological expectation you have when you open a door in your waking life. You generally know what room is on the other side.
Right, but here, that expectation is entirely disabled.
Exactly.
The mechanics of those doors operate like a quantum physics thought experiment. Specifically, Schrödinger's cat. Before she turns the handle, The reality behind the door exists in a state of pure potential.
It is entirely unknown.
Does the autonomous dreamscape pre-generate the environment? Or does the act of her conscious observation force the subconscious to instantly render a reality? The environment remains fluid until the conscious observer interacts with it.
Navigating a fluid environment where your every thought can inadvertently alter the reality around you requires immense discipline. Ruth utilizes a great metaphor to describe her early, less disciplined attempts. She references being a blind horse and a lame rider.
Which stems from the Bon tradition. Providing context for that is crucial here. Bon is an ancient pre-Buddhist spiritual tradition of Tibet that heavily incorporates dream yoga.
Right, utilizing the dream state for intense spiritual and psychological development.
Exactly. The metaphor of the blind horse and lame rider illustrates a dangerous imbalance. The blind horse represents the immense, untamed energy and enthusiasm of experiencing the lucid state.
Just being thrilled you're there.
Yeah. And the lame rider represents a conscious mind that lacks the discipline, focus, and intentionality to steer that energy.
Because if you bring an unfocused mind into an infinitely malleable environment, the environment just swallows you. Success in this realm does not mean making the dream colors brighter or the textures more realistic.
No, success is defined by becoming a grounded, capable writer.
It is the ability to hold a singular, clear intention without being distracted or overwhelmed by all the crazy sensory input. Ruth trained to become that grounded writer, and once she had that level of psychological stability, she began using it to ask the dreamscape massive existential questions.
She decided to test the limits of the autonomous intelligence.
Yeah. What actually happens when you try to hack the system and ask the universe for the ultimate answers?
Asking a direct question tests the boundary between what the deeper mind knows and what the waking ego is actually equipped to comprehend.
Well, during one encounter, she achieves this deeply grounded state, stands in the environment, and simply asks the question out loud, what is self?
Oh, wow.
The environment's reaction is immediate and overwhelming. The ceiling above her begins generating an intricate web of ancient hieroglyphs. This visual morphs into a deep green whirlpool spinning directly above her.
That is incredibly intense imagery.
And it doesn't stop. That whirlpool rapidly expands, consuming the ceiling and the sky until it transforms into a pitch-black vortex. A literal black hole opens up, pushing an unimaginable massive force directly toward her.
See, the ego's response to that level of vastness is self-preservation. Human logic operates through language, neat philosophical concepts, and linear time.
And this just bypassed all of that.
Completely. The autonomous architecture bypassed human logic entirely. It did not offer a tidy sentence explaining the nature of the self. It presented a visceral, experiential representation of annihilation and infinite depth.
Faced with a truth her waking identity could not process without fracturing, Ruth's survival instincts engaged, and she just forcefully woke herself up.
Which is probably for the best.
Yeah. But she encountered a similar threshold of comprehension in another experience she calls the reset code dream. She navigates into an ancient stone town populated by dream figures who seem to recognize her.
And these aren't standard dream characters, right?
No, they carry a distinct presence and look at her with expectation. They ask her to retrieve a code that will reset it all, meaning the structural foundation of existence itself.
No pressure.
Right. She accepts the task, and the environment instantly sucks her into a wormhole. She experiences the sensation of warping through space at an indescribable velocity while thousands of complex characters and symbols rush directly at her from whatever source the wormhole connects to.
The structural limitations of human memory become the primary barrier here. The waking brain has a highly restricted bandwidth for processing and storing novel information.
Especially information that lacks any context in waking life.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what happens. The wormhole eventually spits her back out into the ancient stone town. The dream figures gather around and ask if she successfully retrieved the code. And despite experiencing the intense rush of all those symbols, she realizes she cannot recall a single fraction of it.
Her waking memory simply could not hold the data.
It was just gone.
Analyzing the black hole encounter alongside the forgotten reset code reveals a definitive mechanism of the human psyche. The deeper unconscious, or the broader architecture of reality, contains volumes of information that are fundamentally untranslatable to the human ego.
So the failure to bring the code back isn't a lack of skill on her part.
Not at all. It is an intentional biological and psychological safeguard. If the ego were to fully comprehend the infinite nature of the self, or the literal code of existence, the psychological construct that allows us to function in daily life would likely shatter. The mystery protects the observer.
That makes a lot of sense. The autonomous architecture acts as a filter, offering only what the mind can endure. But, this landscape doesn't solely deal in abstract cosmic codes and black holes. The nature of her exploration shifts dramatically from these sci-fi concepts to deeply personal, emotionally heavy encounters.
Encounters that resemble traditional accounts of crossing the veil.
Exactly. The dreamscape produces presences that feel fundamentally different from standard, internally generated characters.
The distinction between a self-generated dream character and an external presence is a highly debated topic in consciousness studies. Practitioners note a distinct shift in the weight or energetic signature of the environment.
When encountering an entity that seems to exist independently of their own subconscious projection, right?
Yes, the environment feels heavier, more dense.
Her experience in a Helsinki Airbnb highlights this shift perfectly. She rents the apartment and engages in deep meditation, slipping into a heavy, out-of-body state right on the threshold of sleep. She retains the awareness that her physical body is resting in the bedroom, but her localized consciousness shifts into the corridor of the apartment.
And she senses someone else there.
Immediately, she looks into the living room and observes a tall man staring back at her. She initially tries to rationalize it, wondering if another local lucid dreamer has somehow wandered into the same non-physical space. But the presence carries a heavy, dense reality.
She realizes he's deceased.
Yes, she quickly realizes the man she is looking at is dead.
The interaction that follows operates as a direct information transfer, rather than a standard verbal conversation. In these altered states, data is often communicated conceptually and visually.
She describes the transfer as being similar to sitting in a cinema alongside him. She is suddenly shown vivid clips of his lived life. She sees him as an energetic, muscular man playing football. She experiences the perspective of a blonde woman, likely his partner, calling to him across the field. She sees detailed close-ups of his brown hair and beard.
Which is incredibly invasive if you think about it.
It really is. After processing this influx of someone else's memories, she establishes a boundary and asks the man to leave her alone, but he actively refuses, initiating a deeply disturbing chase sequence where she must race this heavy presence back to her physical body to wake herself up.
And she succeeds.
She does, waking with an intense electrical high.
The psychological integration required after an event like that is immense. Imagine experiencing a normal nightmare that ruins your mood for an hour over breakfast. Now amplify that emotional resonance by a factor of 1,000.
Because it was a hyper-realistic encounter.
Yes, with a deceased individual in a non-peaceful, stuck state. Her conscious awareness intersected with his unresolved energy. Contrast that heavy, dense encounter with her experiences involving her deceased family pets.
Oh, the tonal difference is profound. She frequently revisits the woods around her childhood home in her lucid state to spend time with her deceased dogs. It is an environment of immense peace.
It's a completely different energetic signature.
Exactly. Shortly after her elderly dog passed away in waking life, the dog appeared to her in this lucid space to communicate a specific message. The dog conveyed that she was preparing to transition to the other side of the lake to reunite with their previously deceased dog.
We see a beautiful duality in the architecture of the veil. The man in Helsinki represents a dense, unresolved state of being, while the elderly dog represents a natural, peaceful transition.
Both required her to integrate those experiences into her waking life.
Exactly. In both instances, the dreamscape forces the practitioner to process concepts of life, death, and altered reality in a completely immersive way. Our waking society rarely provides the space or the neurological tools to confront mortality and consciousness with such directness.
Bringing this entire journey into focus, we observe a staggering evolution. We tracked a child assuming flight was a universal playground game, an adult terrified that her unspooling reality would cost her her sanity, and an intentional practitioner opening doors in a quantum hallway.
It's quite the arc.
We watched her face the annihilating vortex of the self, attempt to download the universe's reset code, and navigate the lingering, sometimes terrifying presences of the deceased. Ruth's documentation makes one thing undeniably clear. Treating our nightly rest as a passive void ignores an incredibly complex layer of human existence.
And the practical application of this knowledge extends far beyond those who actively practice lucidity. You listening do not need to induce paralysis or seek out the hallway of doors to benefit from these insights.
Right, there's a broader takeaway here.
The broader takeaway is an understanding of neuroplasticity and the structure of fear. By voluntarily facing the unknown depths of her own mind, Ruth transformed destructive psychological patterns and rewired her fear response in real time.
Her journey proves that the waking ego, the internal narrator that insists it understands how the world works, is a highly localized, highly limited tool. We are vast, uncharted territories.
We really are.
Which returns us to the concept of that mental television we discussed at the start. We comfort ourselves by assuming normal, non-lucid dreams are just the biological equivalent of taking out the psychological trash.
The defragmentation program.
Yeah, but consider the implications of Ruth's discoveries. If the waking ego truly only grasps a fraction of our existence, and the subconscious is a massive, autonomous architecture capable of generating profound wisdom in independent environments, what exactly is occurring in your mind during the non-lucid dreams you forget every single morning?
If the landscape of the mind is this infinitely vast when observed by a conscious explorer, what is it constructing when the prefrontal cortex is completely offline?
Are you living profoundly deep, complex, and separate lives every time you close your eyes, completely unobserved and unremembered by your waking self?
Contemplating the depth of our own unremembered lives is a true paradigm-shifting concept.
Keep that in mind the next time you encounter a door in your dreams. You might want to see what happens when you decide to open it.